What is up, guys? Welcome to the Sysadmin Tutorials YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at how you can build a Windows Server 2019 Active Directory domain controller. In this video, I'm going to be showing you two ways that you can build your domain controller. The first way is going to be via the GUI, and the second way, I'm going to be providing 3 scripts that I've written that's going to automate the process for you in a matter of minutes. Now, this video has come about with a few people asking me, how do I create an Active Directory domain controller? And also, how do I set up DNS? Especially since some of the tutorials that I've done on YouTube rely on DNS, such as the VMware vCenter server setup. So I thought I'd go ahead and create this video, and it'll be a step-by-step guide in setting up Active Directory and DNS. And then, like I said before, later on I'll show you some scripts that'll automate the whole process for you. But I think it's important to understand how to go through and set it up with the GUI first, so you understand what's happening in the background. Now, this video is designed for the beginner, but if you have set up Active Directory before, then you might want to skip forward to the scripting part where you can have a look and see what I've written and what I've automated. And you can use that in your production or in your lab environments. So let's dive straight in. Up on screen, we have our Windows 2019 server. And all I've done is I've done a base install and I've set the password. So everything else I haven't touched. There's no config changes at all. So we're going to log in right now. And the first thing that I want to do with my Active Directory domain controller is I want to set a static IP address. So we'll go ahead and do that. And we'll double click on TCP/IP v4. We'll select use the following IP address. And for my IP address, I'm going to type in 192.168.1.222. And the subnet mask will be 255.255.255.0. For my default gateway, I'm going to type in 192.168.1.1. And for my preferred DNS server, I'm going to type in 127.0.0.1. And that's a local IP address for this server. So now we'll just go ahead and close down all these windows. So I'll click on OK here. And I'll click OK here. We'll close this window and we'll close this window. And now I'm going to go ahead and open up Server Manager. I'll then click on Local Server. And a few things that we'll do here. First up, we will enable RDP. So I'm just going to select Allow Remote Connections to this computer. And we'll click OK to allow the firewall rules. And we'll click OK again. Next, I'll disable the IE Enhanced Security configuration. So I'll click on that. And I'm going to turn this off for both administrators and users. I'll click OK. And lastly, we're going to set the server host name. So I'm going to click on the computer name here and we'll click change. And for the computer name, I'm just going to call it Server DC1 and press enter. Now that we've changed the host name, we must reboot the server. So we'll quickly do that. I'll click OK, I'll close that, and I'll click on restart now. Okay, once the server's rebooted, we will then log in again. And we'll open up Server Manager. So we'll click on Start and click on Server Manager. We'll then go ahead and click on Add Roles and Features. You're presented with a welcome screen. We'll click on Next. We'll click on Next here for role-based or feature-based installation. We have our server selected, so we'll click Next. And here we're going to select Active Directory Domain Services. Once you do that, there's going to be a list of features that are going to be installed on this server. And just make sure that you've got Include Management Tools selected as well. And we'll click on Add Features. We'll then click on Next. Now, because the features have already automatically been added for you, we can simply click on Next here. Now, in this demonstration, we're only going to be installing one Active Directory domain controller. However, in production, you want to have at least minimum of 2 Active Directory domain controllers. And that's what the first note is mentioning there. The second note is highlighting that it's going to install a DNS server, which is what we want. So we'll go ahead and click on Next. And up the top here, we'll click on Restart the destination server automatically if required. And then go ahead and click on Yes to do you want to allow automatic restarts. Just make sure that you don't have any files open that you've edited or something like that, because the server is going to automatically restart. And then we'll go ahead and we'll click on the Install button. Now all the Active Directory components are being installed. And we can see up on screen here that the installation has completed successfully. Now what we want to do is we want to click on Promote this server to a domain controller. So we'll click on that now. And we want to select Add a new forest. Now for our Active Directory domain name, we want to type that into the root domain name field here. For mine, I'm going to type in vlab.local. And then I'm going to click on Next. Now, as this is the only Active Directory domain server within my network, I'm happy to leave it on Windows Server 2016. However, if we drop down the menu, you can see that we also have compatibility all the way back to Windows Server 2008. Now, I want my Active Directory domain server to be a DNS server as well. So we'll leave domain name system server selected. And it's also going to be a global catalog server. So this is because it's the first domain server within the Active Directory environment. Now for the Directory Services Restore mode password, we type in a password here. It doesn't have to be the same as the administrator password, but I'm going to select a new password here. So I'm going to type that in. And it's important that you keep that password safe because you need it in the event that you need to do an authoritative or non-authoritative Active Directory domain restore. So we'll click Next. Now, because our DNS name vlab.local will only exist internally, it doesn't exist on any external DNS servers, we don't need to create a DNS delegation. So we'll leave that unticked and we'll click on Next. For the NetBIOS domain name, this is going to be auto-populated and it will be populated as just VLAB. We'll leave that as default and we'll click on Next. For the location of our database, log files and sysvol, I'm just going to leave this on default because I've only got one drive in my server, which is the C drive. So I'm happy to leave those paths as default there and we'll click on Next. And now here is a summary of all the settings that we've selected so far. If you're happy with your settings here, we can click Next. Now, prerequisites check has been run, and the first warning that's presented here is just a security setting that prevents you from connecting to old domain controllers such as Windows NT 4. We don't need to worry about that because we are just running one Active Directory domain server on this network. This second warning here is saying that it can't find a parent zone name for our domain name vlab.local. And that's really good because we only want it to exist internally in our Active Directory domain. So we don't have to worry about that warning. And you can see next that the prerequisites check completed and all prerequisite checks passed successfully. So now we can go ahead and click on Install. Now the server is automatically going to be restarted because we selected that option. So I'm going to click on Close here. The server has rebooted successfully, so now we're going to log back in. And notice here that we're logging into our Active Directory domain now. You can notice that by seeing vlab/administrator. So we'll type in our administrator password. And this is the same password as you set for your administrator account on the local server when you first set up Windows Server 2019. And if we open up the command prompt again, and we type in set, S-E-T, you can see down the bottom that the user domain is vlab, the user DNS domain is vlab.local. Now I'll type in exit. Now what I like to do on Active Directory domain controllers is I like to create shortcuts either on the desktop or on the taskbar of the common tools for example, DNS, Active Directory, users and computers, etc. So we'll do that now. I'll click on Start and I'll type in DNS. And we'll just right click on DNS and we'll select Pin to Taskbar. And I'm going to do the same for Active Directory, users and computers. So I'll right click Active Directory, users and computers, and I'll select Pin to Taskbar. Now first up, we'll have a look at the DNS server. So let's click on the DNS icon. And I'll just expand the window. I'll double click on Server DC1. And if I double click on forward lookup zones, you can see we have a forward lookup zone for vlab.local. And if I click on vlab.local, you can see inside that we have a host record for server DC1 resolving to IP address 192.168.1.222. And we also have an SOA and an NS record. Now forward lookups are going to resolve names to IPs. And what we need to do is we need to set up a reverse lookup. So to set up a reverse lookup, I'm going to click on Reverse Lookup Zones. I'll right click on it and select New Zone. We'll click Next. We'll make it a primary zone and we'll store the zone in Active Directory. We'll click Next. And we'll replicate this to all DNS servers running on domain controllers within the domain vlab.local. So we'll click Next. It'll be an IPv4 reverse lookup zone. So we'll click Next. And here we want to type in the subnet that we're using. So my subnet is 192.168.1.0/24. So here I'm going to type in 192.168.1 and we'll click on Next. And we'll allow only secure dynamic updates. So we'll click Next and Finish. Now what the reverse lookup zone is going to do is normally you would type ping server DC1 and it will resolve the name to the IP address. So that's the forward lookup zone. What the reverse lookup zone is going to do is if I type in ping space -a space and then the IP address 192.168.1.222, which is the IP address of this server, it's going to resolve the IP address to the name. So it will come back saying server DC1. Now these forward and reverse lookup zones are very important when setting up VMware vCenter Server. Some of my videos that I have on my YouTube channel are to do with setting up vCenter Server itself, and they do need forward and reverse lookup zones to complete the install of vCenter Server. So in saying that, if you do go and have a look at some of those videos on setting up vCenter Server, you see that in the video I do reference setting up forward and reverse lookup zones. And here is exactly where you do that. So I'll show you step by step how to do that in those videos if you want to have a look. Some other things that we're going to do here is we're going to right click on server DC1 and we're going to go to Properties and we're going to go to Forwarders. And here you have the option to set up DNS forwarders. So what that means is if this DNS server cannot resolve the DNS name, it will forward to the IP address or to the DNS server that you specify here in this tab. If you don't specify a forwarder, it's going to use the root hints, and you can see them by clicking the root hints tab here. I'm not going to be setting up any forwarders in this demo, but I just wanted to show you where you do that. Now we're going to go ahead and click on the Advanced tab, and I'm going to enable automatic scavenging of stale records. And we'll leave this set to 7 days, which is the default. And what this is going to do is just going to remove old DNS records that don't need to be there anymore, especially records that have been set via automatic secure updates. Now we'll go ahead and click on the Monitoring tab. And we're just going to do a simple DNS test. So we're going to do a query against the DNS server, and then we're going to do a recursive query to other DNS servers. So make sure those two boxes are ticked and we'll click on Test Now. When you click on Test Now, you want to make sure that simple query has passed, and you want to also make sure that the recursive query is passed as well. So we'll click on Apply and OK. Now because we've turned on automatic scavenging of stale records, we're going to also enable a setting within the vlab.local domain here, forwarding domain. We'll right click on that, we'll go to Properties, and we're going to click on Aging, and then we're going to turn on Scavenge Stale Resource Records. And we'll leave that set to 7 days for no refresh interval, and also 7 days for the refresh interval. We'll click on OK and OK again. Now that completes the DNS setup. So we'll now close that. And now we'll go into Active Directory sites and services. So if we click on Start, and I'll just type in sites, and we'll open up Active Directory sites and services. I'll just make the window a little bit bigger. Once in Active Directory sites and services, we'll expand sites and just select subnets folder here. We'll right click on subnets and we'll select new subnet. For the prefix, I'm going to type in 192.168.1.0/24 as that's my local IP subnet. And then I'm going to select default first site name. Now this default first site name is where my Active Directory server is installed to, and I'm just going to show you that in 1 second. But first we'll click OK here. And if I expand default first site name and I expand servers, you can see that my server DC1 is registered here. So what that means exactly is that if we're in a multi-site environment and we have multiple subnets and multiple domain controllers, when a user logs in from a specific subnet, it will use the domain controller that that subnet is tied to. So if I'm coming from 192.168.1.0, then in this setup, it knows to use server DC1. For the default first site name, you can right click on it and select rename. And you might rename it something like Site A, Site B, or maybe a location like a country or a city or something like that. I'm going to leave mine on default first site name. And we'll close the Active Directory sites and services. And then we're going to open up Active Directory users and computers. I'll just make that window a little bit bigger. And I expand the vlab.local domain. You can see here that we've got a few folders. Firstly, the computers folder. Now this is if I join a computer to the Active Directory domain, my computer name and object is going to go into this folder, and it's going to be located here on the right hand side. In the next folder, we've got domain controllers. So this is going to be a list of domain controller objects. You can see here my first domain controller, server DC1. And lastly, you've got users. So here I have my administrator user, and then I also have some groups. So you can create additional users in the users folder, or what you can do is you can right click on vlab.local or your domain, and you can select new, and you can then create organizational units. So if I click organizational unit, I can type in here Windows admins. And you have the option to protect the container from accidental deletion. So you can turn that on or off. I usually leave that as on, and we'll click OK. And from in here, we can right click and we can go new and then select user. And we can just follow this wizard. It's pretty straightforward to create a new user. We'll type in the first name and last name. We'll then type the user login name and we'll click on next. We'll give the user a password. And here you can select if the user must change the password at next logon. The user cannot change the password, or password never expires, or the account is disabled. Because this is an admin account, I'm going to untick user must change password at next logon, and I'm going to click on next. And then I'm going to click on finish. So we want to make this one an administrator, so we're going to double click on this user account, and we're going to click on the member of tab. We'll click on add, and here we're going to type in domain admins. We'll click on check name to make sure that it resolves OK against Active Directory. We'll then click on OK. We'll select domain admins, select set primary group, and then we'll go to domain users and we'll remove that group. Do you want to remove the Windows admin one from the selected group? Select yes, and we can click on OK. And that's how you can create an admin user. I'm going to go ahead and close Active Directory users and computers. So that pretty much completes the steps involved in setting up an Active Directory domain controller using the GUI method. As you can see, there's quite a lot of steps involved in doing it this way. And if you're going to be setting up multiple domain controllers, you definitely want to automate this process. Unless you enjoy sitting here clicking along on all the buttons, next, 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 and filling in fields and all this kind of stuff. So what I want to do now is I want to show you how we can automate this entire process and make this installation much, much faster, and we can repeat this much easier as well using PowerShell. So with this server, what I've done is I've taken a snapshot back when it was a base system. So it was just after the Windows Server 2019 installation, and I've just set a user password. That's it. I haven't done any other configuration. And then we're going to use PowerShell to complete the setup of the server and also of Active Directory. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to restore the server back to the base snapshot, and then we'll boot the server up again. I'm going to copy across the 3 PowerShell scripts onto the desktop, and then we're going to have a look at those scripts and I'm going to explain what each step does. So I'm going to do that now, and what I'll do is I'll pause the video and then we'll come back once the system has been restored to the base image. Okay guys, we're back and we're going to log into our Windows 2019 domain controller. So I'll press Ctrl-Alt-Delete and we'll log in with the password. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy my 3 scripts onto the desktop. Okay, and here they are on the desktop. So we'll click on number 1, we'll right click on it and we'll select Edit. This is going to open up PowerShell ISE. In the first script, we're going to be going through and configuring such options as enabling remote desktop, disabling the IE enhanced security, and setting the host name of the computer. After it's gone through and done that, it's going to wait 30 seconds and then it's going to reboot the server. Now, enabling remote desktop or disabling the IE enhanced security configuration is optional, and we can turn it on or off by selecting the variable here for enable RDP. It's set on yes at the moment, so that is going to enable RDP, but we can simply type no there and it will not enable RDP. Same for the disable IE enhanced security configuration. If that is set to yes, it is going to go through and disable the IE enhanced security, but if it's set to no, then it will not. But first, let's start with the network variables. So with the network variables, we've got the Ethernet alias. Now the Ethernet alias value here, Ethernet 0, we get that by right-clicking on the network, going to Open Network and Internet Settings, clicking on Ethernet, and then clicking on Change Adapter Options. And you can see here that my adapter is called Ethernet 0. So whatever yours says there is what we put into that variable. So I'm just going to close these 2 screens. And next up, we've got the IP address that we wish to set on the server. So I'm going to be setting 192.168.1.222. If you want to use a different IP address, you can simply change that IP address there and put the one that you want to use in. For the prefix length, this is the subnet mask. The subnet mask for my network is 255.255.255.0. So that is a 24 prefix length. So we set 24 there. And for the default gateway, I'm using 192.168.1.1. So I've put that there. Again, if you need to change it, you can simply change that IP address. And for the DNS, the primary DNS of this server, we're going to set that as 127.0.0.1 because this server is going to be an Active Directory domain controller. Next, we have the remote desktop variable. So we can set that as yes or no to enable RDP. And same for disable IE enhanced security. We can set that as yes or no. And the last variable that we need to set is the computer name. So I'm calling mine server DC1. However, if you want to change your host name and call it something different, you can simply replace this value here and you can type in the value that you want to use. So let's have a look at the script. So the first bit here, we're going to be setting the network IP address, and that is this command on line 33. And as you can see here, it is using the variables that we set earlier, such as ETH IP address, ETH prefix length, ETH default gateway, and ETH alias. And then we go on, and on line 34, we set the DNS primary server. So that was the 127.0.0.1 address. And you can see that it is using the variable $ETH DNS. And it's setting it on the adapter with ETH alias. On line 35, we go through and we write to the console that the IP address was successfully set to the variable that we set, and the subnet for the subnet variable, default gateway for the default gateway variable, and the DNS to the DNS variable. Now, if something does go wrong, if there is an error in either setting the IP address or setting the DNS server, you can see at the end of the script that we've got error action stop. And what this means is that it is going to stop the script from executing any further, and it is going to come down into this catch section here. So in the catch section, it's going to write a warning onto the screen saying failed to apply network settings, and then it's going to show you the error after. And the error is this $_.exception.message. And then it's going to break, so it's going to stop the script entirely. If we scroll down, we have the set RDP section. So because this statement is true, enable RDP equals yes, that means it's going to execute line 46. And what that does is it's going to change the property in the registry to enable RDP. And then on line 47, it's going to open up the firewall and allow port 3389. And we've got the same thing here, that if there is an error, to stop the script and come down here and write the warning message. Next we have, if enable RDP is not equal to yes, then just write to the host RDP remains disabled. Now we have the same condition here for disabling IE enhanced security configuration. So if disable IE sec config equals yes, then it's going to execute line 65 and 66. And with that, it's going to set two registry entries, and it's going to be disabling the administrator and the user IE security configuration. We also have error action stop at the end of these lines, and it's going to go down into the catch section. If there is an error, it's going to write the warning, and it's also going to display the error message as to why it stopped. If disable IE sec config is not equal to yes, then it's just going to write the host that IE enhanced security configuration remains enabled. The second last bit to this script is setting the host name. So here we rename the computer to what it currently is, and that's using this variable here, $env computer name. And we set it to the new name that we set in our variables on the top of this script, which is $computer name. And once again, we have error action stop and the catch section down here. Once all that's done, it's going to write a message to the console telling you to save all your work. The computer is rebooting in 30 seconds. Then it's going to wait 30 seconds on line 92. After the 30 seconds is up, it's then going to restart the computer. If there is any error with restarting the computer, it's going to come down to the catch section again, and it's going to display a warning message. So that's what script number 1 does. So let's go ahead and we'll run this script. And down the bottom in the blue section, you will see the output. So I'm going to go ahead and click on play. The script you're about to run will be saved, so that's fine. We'll click OK. So here we go, the IP address has successfully been set. RDP has been enabled, IE enhanced security configuration has been successfully disabled, and the computer name has been set to server DC1. So after 30 seconds, the computer is going to reboot. I'm just going to speed this up a little bit. And there we go, the server is rebooting. Okay, we'll log back into the server. And we're going to go ahead and open up Server Manager. So we'll click on Start, and we'll go to Server Manager. We'll then go ahead on the left-hand side and click on Local Server. And here you can see that the computer name has been set to Server DC1. Remote Desktop has been set to Enabled. And IE enhanced security configuration is now off. So that was all set with PowerShell. And now we'll jump into the command line and we'll just have a look at the IP configuration. So we'll click on Start. We'll type in CMD. Click on Command Prompt. And here we'll type in ipconfig/all. And up on screen, next to IPv4 address, you can see the IP address that we've set with the PowerShell script. You can also see the subnet mask, default gateway, and the DNS servers. So I'm going to type in exit, and we're going to right click on script number 2, and we'll select edit. I'm just going to maximize the window. And within this script, we only need to set one variable. And that variable is, what do you want your Active Directory domain to be called? So my one, I'm going to be calling it vlab.local. So just replace that value with the domain that you want to use. And let's go ahead and look at the script and see what it does. Now on line 20, this is where it's going to be adding the Windows feature AD domain services. And then on line 21, this is where it's going to be installing the remote server administration tools for Active Directory management. And you can see again, we've got the error action stop. We've got the right host when it's successful. And if it's not successful, it will go down into the catch area and it'll say it failed to install Active Directory domain services and with the error message. Now in the next section, this is where we're going to be installing the ADDS forest. And this is on line 31. So we're going to be doing that with the domain name that we set on the variable at the beginning of this script. So if you remember, my one was called vlab.local and the variable name was $domain name. It's also going to go ahead and install DNS. After doing that component, it's not going to reboot the server just yet. It's going to move on and we're going to reboot the server manually here. So I put in a thing here, or write host, to say save all your work. The computer is rebooting in 30 seconds. We've got the sleep 30 again, like we did in the previous script. And then it's going to go through and reboot the computer. So with that being said, let's click on play. Okay, so the Active Directory domain services has installed successfully, as you can see up on screen. It's now prompted us to enter in the safe mode administrator password. So I'm going to do that here in this field. And then I'll click on OK. And I'm going to type the password again in the confirm field. And we'll click on OK again. And we'll click on yes to continue with this operation. Okay, Active Directory domain services has been configured successfully. So we are all good to go. I'm just going to scroll up quickly. And you can see that these warning messages are the same warning messages that we got when we configured Active Directory domain services in the GUI. So we'll scroll down and in just a second, the server is going to reboot. Now that the computer has returned to the login screen, we will press Ctrl-Alt-Delete and enter in the password. We're now going to move on to script number 3. So we'll right click on that and select edit. I'll maximize the window again. Okay, here we have a few variables that we need to set. The first one I've called global subnet. And for me, the subnet that I'm using is 192.168.1.0/24. And that variable is going to be used for the reverse lookup zone and also be used for Active Directory sites and services subnet. We then go on to the subnet location. So for me, it's Sydney. So I've typed in Sydney. We then have the NTP or the time servers. So I've allocated 2 time servers here that are going to be set on this Active Directory domain controller. And we'll now scroll down to the settings. So we can see here on line 26 that we add the DNS reverse lookup zone for the global subnet, which is 192.168.1.0/24. And if we keep scrolling down, we then set the DNS scavenging, just exactly the same as what we did on the GUI setup. So we've got that now in PowerShell. So that's line 35 down to 41. And this DNS scavenging section sets the scavenging on the server and also on the zone. We then scroll down to line 43. And this is where we create the Active Directory sites and services subnet. And you can see on line 45 that we reference the global subnet here when we create the new Active Directory replication subnet. And that subnet is tied to the default first site name in Active Directory sites and services. So same thing as we did in the GUI. Lastly, on line 53, or the section from 53 down to 70. We then go through and we set the NTP servers on this Active Directory server. The NTP servers are going to be set on your PDC. So what I've done here on line 55, I've queried the Active Directory domain controllers, and I've just selected the domain controller that contains the PDC emulator role. So once it finds that, it'll put it into the variable server PDC. And then on line 57, it's saying that if the variable server PDC exists, or there is some value tied to it, then run the following. Now on line 60, we're calling the w32tm.exe file, and we're running that file with the arguments /config/manual peer list with the NTP servers 1 and 2. Sync from flags manual. Is it a reliable time source? Yes. And update. Once we've set all that, we then on line 61 stop the W32 time service. We wait for 2 seconds and then we start the service again. And that's the process to set an NTP reliable time source for your Active Directory domain controller. So we'll scroll back up and we'll click on play. And within a matter of seconds, you can see that the script has executed and has applied all those settings throughout our server. So the reverse lookup zone was set successfully. And then we moved on to setting the scavenging. So that was all done successfully as well. We added the subnet within Active Directory sites and services. That was successful. We then moved on and set the NTP config for this server. And after that, it stopped the Windows time service and then started the Windows time service again. So once it did that, that meant that the NTP config was complete. And you can see there that on screen it says successfully set the NTP servers with the 2 NTP servers there. So now that we've applied all this PowerShell scripting and everything, let's go and verify that all the settings have been put in correctly. So we've already verified that the settings from script number 1 have been applied successfully. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up script number 2. And in script number 2, if you remember, we went and installed Active Directory domain services and the remote management tools for Active Directory as well. So I'm going to open up Active Directory users and computers, and I'll just make the screen a bit bigger. And here we have it. We have our vlab.local domain, and we have all the folders that we saw in the GUI setup. I'm also going to open up Active Directory sites and services. I'll maximize this window as well. And we'll expand sites. And you can see here that we've got our default first site name. If I expand that and I expand servers, we have our server DC1 here. Now if we go back to the script, we'll move on to script number 3. So this is where we added a reverse DNS zone. So I'm going to open up DNS now. And I'll make this window large as well. And here we'll expand server DC1 and we'll expand reverse lookup zones. And here we have our 192.168.1 reverse lookup zone. We'll then go back to the script. And the next section was setting the DNS scavenging. So within DNS, I'll right click on the server DC1 server object. We'll go to properties and we'll click on the advanced tab. And you can see that enable automatic scavenging for stale records is ticked and it was set at 7 days. So we'll cancel that one. And we'll also go onto the forward lookup zone for vlab.local. We'll right click on that, select properties, and then we'll click on the aging button. And we can see here that scavenging has also been turned on and it's been set for 7 days for both the no refresh interval and the refresh interval. So we'll click on cancel and we'll go back to the script. We'll scroll down a little bit. So the next bit was setting the Active Directory sites and services subnet. So we'll go to sites and services and we'll expand the subnets folder. And you can see here that we've got our 192.168.1.0/24 subnet. If I right click on that subnet and go to properties, we can see that it is tied to the site default first site name. So we'll click on cancel there and we'll go back to the script again. We then configured the NTP servers for this domain server. To verify that the NTP servers have been set correctly, we're going to click on start. And we're going to go to the command prompt. And within the command prompt, we're going to paste in this command, w32tm /query /configuration. We'll press enter on that. And just to the right of NTP servers, we can see that we've got the 2 NTP servers that we specified within the PowerShell script. So hopefully in this demonstration, even if you have never had any experience with PowerShell, I've been able to show you how you can easily create an Active Directory domain controller using these PowerShell scripts. And the way that I started with PowerShell, I didn't just open it up and start writing scripts like these. I actually just looked for the component that I wanted to configure. So let's say, for example, all I want to do is configure the Windows hostname. I will then go to Google, I'd search on how to create a Windows hostname or how to change the Windows hostname in PowerShell. I'd get that command, I'd put it in, I'd see how that worked, and then I'd move on to the next bit. So maybe the next bit was enabling RDP. So I would go to Google, I'd have a look, and I'd see how to enable RDP. I would put that into the script, and then I would just build the script bit by bit like that. As you can see, I have put in a few like tries and catches and error messages and all these kind of things, which is custom. So if you're looking, or if you're just starting to use PowerShell, that's probably the best way to learn and just get your hands dirty and get into it. Use a virtual machine, take snapshots, revert to this previous snapshot if you make a mistake. It's really a great way to learn. Okay, that completes this video on setting up your Windows Active Directory domain controller. We've gone through setting up your domain controller with the GUI method and also with the PowerShell scripting method. Just out of interest, I'd be keen to know which one you prefer. Do you prefer the GUI method or do you prefer the PowerShell scripting method? Leave a comment below. And also if you have any questions whatsoever, especially around the PowerShell scripting, if you're quite new to it, then also leave a comment below and I'll do my best in getting back to you. If you liked the video, then please leave a big thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, hit the subscribe button. If you are a returning subscriber, thank you very much for your support. And we're going to see you again in the next video. So take care and bye for now.